Yeah. uh Sorry about that, guys. Technological meltdown. What can I say? Um, Basically, what it seems like, my webcam, the cable was a little faulty. So yeah. Um, had to readjust, but I'm just gonna use a regular Surface Cam. I need to get a new webcam. That's essentially what it is, a new external webcam, because everything else is failure upon failure. But now I'm just gonna wait for everybody to kind of rejoin. So yeah. Um, Let me try to get it going. Sorry about that to everyone. All right. Where was I? IPCO. So yes, we visited the social market. Like I said, you can pick your section that you want to go to, where to spend your points. Of course, there's limits to how you can spend your points, and that was interesting to see. And like I said, the one place on Sint Maarten that I could think is closest to that is actually Freegan Foods. So it's essentially what you call it. So yeah. Let's see. Da, 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 da. All right. Right. So that was the Saturday, and then so we talked about poverty after the social market visit. We talked about poverty the next day in IPCO, where we discussed, how do you impact that? How do you change that for your people? And like I was saying before, I got cut off with my technical difficulties. We also kind of recognize like the that there are challenges in the Netherlands as well with this, with the cost of living and such. And people are generally, what used to be able to carry them through the month is not making it anymore. Especially when you look at like single mothers, etc. So they had quite a few statistics to share with us on that. And that was a presentation from Benedict Holleris from the Social and Cultural Planning Bureau, and Glenn Today, who's a professor at the Rijks University of Groningen. And then we had a coffee break. And then Saturday, my favorite part was actually the discussion on education. So there were 25 students from the Caribbean part of the kingdom that were brought in. I think we had every island represented, maybe not Statia, because I don't remember hearing any of the students came out of Statia, but we had like 5 Saba students, which is great. So shout out to Saba. Um, we had we had Saba students and Mountain students, Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire, you know how it goes. So yeah, I in my group discussion, I had a Sematina, I had one girl from Saba, which is Jody, from the Bite the Bullet podcast, and then we had 2 students from Curacao and one from Bonaire. And the real, it was frustrating. It was nice. So it was great that they came out, because to be honest, getting students to come out and to these types of things is very tough. As someone who ran a student organization up here, yeah. If you're not giving free food, then maybe that's why they came, because we did have lunch. But yeah, basically, you're going to be in a struggle. So what happened is that I was frustrated as well, because as many know, in 2009, when I came up to the Netherlands, in 2011, I ended up starting a student foundation with Cyril Fennings and Diane Daniel from Sint Maarten. There were a bunch of other Sint Maarteners with me. Edwina Hodge, your own super kid was helping. Raquel, Crystal, just, Jacques, a bunch of people. And we were doing events. We were trying to give guidance. Brian, we were trying to give guidance to like students coming up. We wrote a student handbook and such, and all of the same issues that prompted this formation of that foundation are there today. So most of them share the difficulty with getting a regular insurance, because we sell these students when they come up as part of study financing. They get a student insurance, via that entity, whether it's, as back in the day, it was S4, then it was SSA, which is Curaçao's own, and Aruba has their own as well. and then it's like you start to work, and then suddenly that student insurance no longer works for you, because in the Netherlands it's mandatory that, you know, if you're going to be working and such, you have what's called a basisverzekering, a basic insurance. Anyway, not to go into all of that, but it was just frustrating to see that these are the same issues that they're struggling with today. Then we received a presentation from Joost van Slobbe. So we had lunch with the students as well, and then after that we had the presentation from Mr. van Slobbe, who's the director of the national, like, basically it's an association that is working towards undermining criminal elements. So trying to tackle criminality, corruption, safety, security, and such within the kingdom as well. So we talked a bit about all the entities that work together, whether it's FIOD, you know, or the rest of them. They gave us a little presentation, which they stapled very strangely. But yeah, so that's also part of what it was. So like customs, FIOD, the marechaussees, defensie, and all of that. And then we had the discussion about, yeah, basically how to live, you know, safety, etc., on how, you know, we work towards that. And then after a break, we had the democratic deficit, which we were also discussing, you know, as part of it's been a discussion in the kingdom for a very long time. How do we address the democratic deficit? The fact that the Netherlands can, you know, sometimes they kind of interfere in our political handling. It's sort of a blockage when we want to do certain things, and also it's just, you know, on a parity level, we're not really there with them. So that was also part of it. And then yeah, that's where we are right now. Tomorrow is the last day, so today's a bit of a free day. Tomorrow is the last day, and we have a presentation on the National Slavery Museum, which is being built in Amsterdam. And then we have a discussion and presentation on the access of the autonomous countries of Aruba, Curacao, and Sint Maarten to, for example, EU funds. And that would be a public presentation. There's a live stream of IPKO if you want to be able to follow. Of course, at 9 a.m. Holland time, most of you are still in La La Land. So it could be something you could rewatch when you're done. And, you know, I always, since I've been in Parliament, I get this question of, you know, why is IPKO important, blah, blah, blah. And I think as a country, we really haven't focused, or we haven't explained to people how relationship development works, and also how it can actually, you know, benefit things. If you have people that go in with a targeted like approach. So I give a good example. In tripartite, right, which is the 3 Caribbean countries, there has been, we all know we have issues getting to each other. So you want to go to Saba, you better be ready to sell half a kidney, right? And to get to Curacao, to get to Aruba, it's also very painful. So I think a year or two ago, I requested that on the agenda of tripartite, we put a discussion on how can we make air travel in the islands in the kingdom easier and more affordable. What that has led to is now we're getting updates from the Dutch Caribbean Consortium of Airports, basically, so the DCCA, where they are working on the same issues, but with long-term goals in mind. But what IPKO and tripartite via our governments was able to get done was to say, you know, what can be done in the short term. So when we got an update from them in October last year, the update was that they were now trying to find ways to streamline fees, so that that could already bring down the price a bit. We're pending a further update from them since that October update. And what we did receive from government in terms of an answer was that now they're working on that, but they're also now looking at, can we designate one another as a domestic route, so that we can just kind of like how it is in the US, you know, state to state. So that's something that is also being looked at. And that further discussion has come from putting it on the agenda of tripartite at IPKO, so that we can discuss it. And then who knows, it's also something that the Netherlands is aware of, that we're discussing, and can lead to hopefully some type of tangible result when it comes to KLM prices and such, to be able to come down and increasing that traffic flow between Sint Maarten and the Netherlands, you know. So those are the ways that going to these conferences, being able to look people in the eye, have those conversations, and just explain the reality of it. You know, the first time that this came up, you know, my mom, it was personal for me as well, because my mom, her sister had passed away in Aruba, one of her oldest sisters, you know, and she barely could get a flight. Like, it was literally hope and pray that somebody got bumped or canceled or whatever, and that is how she was able to attend the funeral. But it's frustrating, because you can imagine from a medical perspective, you know, you get a call that your great aunt in Curacao fall down, and they calling everybody home, and you can't find a flight because of jet or whatever. And it's just, yeah. So to increase and improve the frequency and the affordability of that, that's why I wanted it on the agenda. And now we see that we're getting somewhere finally. So it may take some time, but you know, conversations and those types of things at that level, it does take a while. It's not going to happen overnight, and I never try to promise anybody that something's going to happen overnight. So and then, yeah, with the students, I was very happy to see that they've gotten to a point where they're so resilient, you know, and IPCO helps us to see that as well, because we always try to engage with the students at least once while we're here. Luckily, this time we're going to get to do it twice. So we did it yesterday via the official IPCO with our counterparts. And on Monday in the evening, we are going to be meeting specifically St. Maarten students and young professionals at the cabinet of the Ministerial Plenipotentiary. And so that's also going to be a wider discussion. You know, I'm very excited to see, you know, who's going to come out, so that we can start to have conversations with them about how they can contribute, while it's not necessarily moving home, because I, for one, I never tell them come home right away, because it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't agree with that. In this particular global village that we live in, and COVID showed us, you don't have to be in a place to make a difference in a place. It's just a matter of us as a country prioritizing involving the diaspora and using those students and working with them to contribute to the projects that we have going on back home. So that's definitely something that I wanted to kind of touch on. We are returning from IPCO on Tuesday. So returning to Sint Maarten, and then on Thursday, we're right back into the swing of it. We have a central committee meeting to discuss the extending the NRPB for 2 years, as well as a closed door committee for integrity meeting. Hopefully I have quorum for that, because, yeah, I haven't had it the last time I tried to call this. And that's regarding the advices from the Ombudsman and the Integrity Chamber on the draft Code of Conduct for Parliament. And then on Friday is a big day, because we, of course, have meetings about GEBE. And that's also something that I think, you know, ties back into that relationship development that I have always championed since being in Parliament, where it's like we have to have these conversations, we have to maintain these relationships, because in times of crisis like now, you're going to see what is possible with the people that are your friends. You understand? And that's really what diplomacy and foreign affairs and relations is all about. And we also have a role to play in that. So I think that's when people ask me, well, what's important about IPCO? Well, because the people that were texting me to ask, you know, what is going on? How can anybody be of assistance? It was my colleagues that I've met over the years in the Netherlands, Curacao, and Aruba. So I think that's where I'd like to keep it, you know, when we talk about that. So yeah, which brings me again to you said GEBE, guys. So as we know, earlier this week, there's been a lot of chaos, you know, from the blackout that we had previously to the engine leak that made them have to take an engine offline so that it could be worked on. I think, you know, how can I say? We've come to a critical point, of course, in GB's existence. And I heard about the public information session because, you know, luckily PFP candidates were there. They were present. MP DeWeaver was there. Rosalinda, David, Nelly, and Marvia were there. And they were, of course, reporting in. First, shout out to Melanie Schwazi for the running thread on Facebook about it. I read it when I got up the next day, and I was like, what? A lot of interesting answers coming out that have never really been answers given before. And I'm going to work myself to kind of like put all of those into like a document, because I think it was great. You know, I think, you know, Melanie, if you feel like it, if you have the energy or someone else can do it, put everything into a document, kind of like how Parliament gets, you know, questions and answers from the government. Because when I read some of the answers to some of the questions, I was taken aback, because these are things that I've been asking GB in Parliament for quite some time. And yeah, the feedback received was that the session was appreciated, but many left very frustrated about the level of transparency and accountability that got us to this point. You understand? And I think when we most people told me, even my own candidates, that there were no real concrete assurances about, overcoming the crisis in the short to mid to long term, which is not helpful, I think. And I think that, from a communications perspective, I think GB could improve a lot on their public outreach. These seem to be efforts and energy that should have been put in maybe since the hack, to be honest with you, instead of relying on the government of the time to communicate what was going on. Because as we now see, that what was being played, is not what has been said to us has not been the truth, to be honest, to really break it down. As coalition MPs, MP De Weaver and myself have urged the government to have better communication about the current energy crisis and to give, as much needed reassurance as possible to the community. So we continue to push for that, even in this capacity that we have now. And I want to also touch a bit on the fact that I've seen very interesting, how you call it? How do I say? I've noted, let me put it professionally, I've noted the recent calls for collaborative action to combat energy issues by the former Minister of Rami, and as well as other candidates from the National Alliance, who work in Rami, in permits, infrastructure, except whatever it is right now, in regards to the impact on the grid, from large developments. And I think, the reality is that the call for collaboration is too late, guys. PFP on numerous occasions, we have tried to offer suggestions. We've asked the former minister, to hit the pause button in the past on large scale developments. And, the response was, well, I can't stop persons from building on their own land. And that the revenue from building permits is what carried the country through the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was limited economic activity. And I think, that's unfortunate to hear, because what it shows me is that there was no interest in actually looking. There was no really critical thinking applied. I don't think anybody has to be. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to, be an urban and spatial development specialist or so to see that we would have ended up here eventually with the grid. It's to me, it's common sense. But what it does also show me is that, at the end of the day, we as PFP, and I've in discussions with the chief of staff of Rami, Rayon Peterson, his whole goal has been to improve that communication, in the permits process and such with GB, and it's also telling me that, it's now is when they're getting the most info that they have. Now GB knows specifically how many permits have been approved in the last year and a half, leading up to today and leading up to this energy crisis that we're in now. I find it, a little nuts and bolts that the former head of permits, now head of infrastructure, or whatever the role is, that the pushback is, well, Rami never informed GB. No Ministry of Rami or Public Works or whatever we were called before becoming a country has ever done that. But, the good thing about, or the thing that I would expect for 4 years of stability, is that the ability and the opportunity to set a new precedent was there, but it wasn't set. And now it's left to us to set that precedent, which I don't mind. I have no issues being a trendsetter. We're already doing it. From style of campaign, 2 people on an interview, like we see it. Like, thank you for the flattery, but I would prefer that the copy paste or the imitation goes beyond that, and then it goes to tangible things. Had all my ideas or all our ideas as PFP been borrowed by the past coalition in terms of things to fix the ministries, especially the Ministry of Rami, I would have been a happy camper. Like, I would have been like, all right, you're welcome, but I'm glad to see it happening, because that is what is actually country above self. Not that I have to hoard it and I have to be the one to do it. No, we've talked about what could help avoid an energy crisis. It's just that, like, it continues to be interesting to me that those linked to the former coalition now are like so hard on us. and this current government to fix things in literally 17 days. But when you ask, well, why didn't you have solutions? You get the very basic answer of, well, I had my ministry to worry about, and I'm not going to overstep. Well, then you are a failure. Then you're a failure. I'm very sorry, because the point of being a government, the point of having a council of ministers, is that everyone is expected to work together. No one is meant to be a silo. The point is that you're expected to collaborate and communicate and work on fixing the things that interlink with one another's ministry. And right now you're failing at that. You failed, essentially. If your answer to, well, why didn't you have solutions, is, well, I had my ministry to worry about, I don't care if your ministry was the Ministry of Health. I don't care if your ministry was the Ministry of Teat. You had a responsibility to work together to fix the issue for the country. And that, I think, is what's so fascinating to me, so that is basically I'm a little confused about it. And then, it's either it wasn't my ministry, or you just get crickets or excuses, or there's a lot we wanted to do and we had no capacity, but there's a lot you did do. So you found the capacity for the things that you wanted to do, which was, pass a bunch of big development permits, which, okay. But yeah, so the conclusion I've come to is that it's either PFP is operating at such a high level that our expectations are heavier on us, or it is that some get to operate at such a low and basic level, but then get to hold others to a higher standard. We've been vocal as an opposition, and we're still vocal as part of this current constellation about the exact same issues. So nothing has changed except, our access to what they call in tech the back end, and our ability to then be more transparent with the people of St. Maarten as things are discovered that have brought us to these tipping points. And I'm not saying it's just been the last 4 years, but if the excuse was always we didn't have stability to get things done, even the most basic things couldn't get done when we didn't have stability, then what did we give you 4 years for? I think is really my base question. But in any event, I think we talk a lot about the issue of GB as impacting our visitors, and I've seen a lot of that concern. And to be honest, I care, but at the same time, I don't care, because what concerns me is how GB impacts the local psyche and morale levels of my own people, of St. Maarten people. It's not just about hotels not having power or restaurants, or so. It's about issues of food security, persons having to get new refrigerators, or maybe their refrigerator just starts to act crazy and their food spoils, their groceries spoil. And if you look at the price of groceries, how am I supposed to accept that as a mother, or a father with children that have to be fed? You understand? Kids not being able to study properly because they don't have lights at night, or they don't have lights for the majority of the day. It's also about the psychological impact of that and what that is having on people. Like someone was telling me that where was it? I forgot the country. I'm so sorry, but basically that, yeah, they're now looking at the psychological impact of what it is to have no power for 16 hours of the day. And even though it may be spaced out for us, if your power is off 3 hours in the morning, like it was, like I'll tell you, the day we were leaving for IPKO, I live in Defiance. That's not a secret. My power went off at around 8 o'clock, I think, or 7:30 in the morning. And I had already packed from the night before. But I always pack 2 nights in advance. And then it went off from 7:30 till about 10:30. And then it came back. And then by the time I had gotten to the airport at like 1 something, it had gone off again. So for another 3 hours. So that's 6 hours already. And then let's say if we're getting to a point where we have rolling blackouts 3 times a day, your power is already off for 12 hours, guys. So we're already approaching that 16-hour benchmark of people are going to start having mental health crises, where they're just going to be stressed because it's stressful to not be able to see. Listen, I'm afraid of what slaves. You think when the power goes to dead, I'd be frightened. That is a stress on me. And it may sound funny, but you have to think about that. People can't see things at night. You can't see people in your yard. You can hear things, but you can't see it. The stress of what's going to go bad in my fridge. Should I even buy groceries? What's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? And another thing, sometimes persons may leave a fan on, or power may go while the fan is on or the AC is on, and then you're like, ugh, gotta unplug everything. That strains those devices as well. So I think, I try to look at it's not just a Vrami issue, because I think a lot of people are also looking at the acting minister like, what you doing? But it's a everybody issue, because what's going to happen is the psychological impact is going to impact health, the educational impact when kids can't concentrate because it's too hot in a classroom, and we're entering the final days before we go into the summer. So that's what I also want to kind of put forward for people to start to kind of think about and work on recognizing. Further, in what's been happening, so over the weekend there was a few videos, yesterday in particular, shared on social media by St. Maarten Pride Foundation of works that were taking place in Pelican behind the Hilton Hotel. And the police came to the location within minutes, I have to say. They were alerted. They spoke to a gentleman who then said that, we have a letter of permission for activities from the Ministry of Vrami, but did not want to provide that letter to the police. So the police then informed them that they had to stop the work immediately. So what happened is, right away, Rayon, hopped in the car, drove down, went to check it out, and essentially, they were not permitted. And he himself was taken aback by what was happening on the beach. So that is under the full attention then, as I've been informed, of the cabinet of Vrami. It's essentially, it's similar to what kind of happened with the old Simsame Bridge a few weeks ago, in the sense of the boldness has now come to where I could do what I want. I paid for my building permit, whatever paltry fee I paid to the government and whatever fee I paid to whoever else, and I can just, build as I please and do as I please. That does not happen. I think we've seen already the example of Bonaire, where Bonaire's Island Council said, you're not building, sorry, to a resort. And I know that resort has knocked on our door in Sint Maarten quite often. And I'm hoping that the Ministry of Vrami they meet when they come knocking again is not the minister that they would have met, last year or up until April, because then might as well just to GB and our electricity grid. And speaking of Vrami, I wanted to also just announce here, I've already informed membership and such, that as party leader of PFP, I had to make the decision to recall Patrice Gumbs as the Minister Plenipotentiary. So Patrice will be reassigned to the Ministry of Vrami full-time. And then the Deputy Minister Plenipotentiary will handle duties up here in the Netherlands. And why I did that? So after the events of the last few weeks, I understand that while we have this legal fight with the governor for what is clearly obstruction, and it is important to continue to fight that fight, and what has all happened during the formation process, leading to, what could have been a constitutional crisis. It's not something that it's not something that we expected at all. It's not something that I'm very happy about. But, we're never going to put PFP above the people of Sint Maarten and the needs of the country to be able to function. We're in hurricane season. Vrami needs a full-time minister. And while I definitely appreciate Minister Janssen Webster's help and her work for stepping in the meantime, we do require someone in the seat, especially since this administration is going to be there until a new one is formed, so after the election. So Patrice is still right now working on some of the main goals he had as a Minister Plenipotentiary. And he's, of course, still going to advise the deputy, and just share what the focus, I think, should be. We've already spoken about the students and stuff like that. And then essentially what that's going to do, he's ready and able to jump into this role. He's already kind of shifted his thinking to it, which is something that I'm very pleased to say, we pride ourselves on putting forward candidates who can adapt like that and who have that base knowledge of what needs to be done in crisis scenarios, etc., and in planning and execution. So I believe as of June 25th, he will be in that role full time. And then what essentially we're looking forward to happening, at least from the perspective of Vrami, is having a 100% focused minister on the GB issue, on our infrastructure issues, our environmental issues in particular. We're going to hope to be able to start running out some updates soon. And you'll go back to seeing updates via the Vrami Facebook page, which, access to that. Let's not even talk about social media policy. That could have been done in 4 years, but whatever. And yeah, helping to kind of create protections and bubbles for like whistleblowers, because when I think about GB, had we had the whistleblower policy that was advised by all and integrity reports that were done by international agencies, I think we would have known about the issues in GB, etc., much earlier. So that's also something that I'm hoping to happen. And yeah, there's quite some low-hanging fruit as well in terms of getting ready for hurricane season, in terms of the whole Dida Marais situation that's happening still and impacting persons' ability to to use their to get deeds for their land and stuff. um Sorry. I think I'm looking forward to seeing how Patrice is going to thrive in the role, because I know that he will. And yeah, in local news, June 13th is Flag Day. We'll be back in time for it. It's the annual commemoration of our Flag Day. It starts at 8:30 with the school parade. I think we're starting at Genevieve the Weaver. I think I read that. Yeah, it's going to include the school parade, of course. Sorry, the air in Holland is dry, so I'd be dying sometimes. School parade, flag hanging, hoisting ceremony, culture performances and such. I've always enjoyed it. So that's the I've always enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to that. And it usually consists of like, it's a good bit. I think it's like 600 students, and it's all of the public schools, I believe. So you're gonna have Marie Genevieve the Weaver, Martin Luther King Jr., Prince William Alexander seniors as well have been invited to attend. Probably the like Rubila Bay, those type of schools are gonna be there. So I was looking forward to that. And then I want to touch a bit. I saw that Coral Telecom on Sint Maarten has they're experiencing a DDoS attack. So a DDoS, basically it's a dedicated denial of service. So you're not able to use it, basically. And I want to say, as I've said previously on the stream, these are things that are not happening in a vacuum. Yeah, they're happening across the region. So what you've seen is over the past year, there's been a few penetrative hacks in Caribbean telecom, namely in Trinidad and Tobago. But last fall, I think you also had government hacks, which was causing it basically prompted a call for changing in the laws and updating certain laws in Trinidad. But what you've seen is that you're getting a lot more cloud-based attacks. So a 95% increase, I think, when you compare 2022 and 2023. So what it means is that in all those areas, you have to increase your vigilance, which is what PFP, from myself to Marvio to David, have always been talking about. We need to increase our resilience and our robustness in how we approach cybersecurity. I saw, for example, someone brought it to my attention that the form for you to be able to pay, I think, your road tax on government's page is just a bare naked credit card form. I'm not doing that. So, when I saw it and they sent me screenshots, because I've never gone to pay my road tax, because there's certain things I'm not going to trust, and I'm sorry, but knowing that our own government has been victim to ransomware attacks in the past, I'm not going to put my credit card information in on a form that looks like I could have made it in Microsoft's Excel. So basically, you have that happening. Jamaica itself is seeing a rise in cybersecurity issues and hacks and breach attempts. Martinique has been hacked 2 times in 2023, and the second hack basically led to them having disrupted internet services. Sound familiar to Coral Telecom? Other infrastructure as well. And their government last disclosed a cyber attack in a notice that it released in May of 2023, and a notice about cyber attacks in June of 2023. It's concerning because, as we've stated since the GB hack, we again, to remind everybody, called the meeting, the first question hour with the former Minister of Rami, and then thereafter the mantra has been, what are we doing to prevent this from happening again? And not just at GB. We've wanted to bring in the other government-owned companies, because I just want everybody to think about something for a minute. Imagine your tower Your tower is the victim of a hack attempt or a penetrate, basically a ransomware attack, right? Or they manage to penetrate and they gain control of a system. Let's just imagine, because it's happened in the States. I want to also make that clear. It's not like it's impossible. It's happened to smaller airports in the US. Do you know what that could cause for the amount of air traffic we have on a Saturday afternoon at like 11:30, 1 o'clock? So I'm trying to also like get people to think that this is not just, your credit card information. This is actual attacks that can damage your infrastructure, your country's functioning, etc. Because it's against the law. So I governments and infrastructure usually get targeted. Why? Because a government would most likely pay in these instances, because they don't want to have their infrastructure down, because you're a country. You're not just a business who can't use a credit card, or people can't use your broadband points to access the internet, right? So that's usually why the target is there. So the this is something that we will continue to champion. Cybersecurity has always been something that we've talked about. I don't know how many more ways Marvio can say it, or I can say it, or Lucho can say it, or so David can say it, but it has to be something that we focus on. Government and businesses have to also kind of come together on that. The building blocks are there. We just have to put the Legos. If you were bad at Legos, then maybe that's why it in 4 years, these types of things could not be rolled out. But I was really good at Legos. All of us were. So we're gonna get it done. Don't worry. In closing, because like I said, I have a meeting at 4 o'clock my time and I got about 7 minutes. It sounds real crap to say, but to combat and to deal with this energy crisis, I urge those who can to, turn off your lights, appliances, devices when they're not in use. If you can manage your essential appliances, prioritize those like refrigerators, medical equipment. If you have portable power banks for your phones and such, I know you can't unplug your fridge, but I unplug my TV and everything else, precious electronic, outside of my refrigerator when I leave the house. I also unplug fans, and why is because, I remember after Hurricane Lewis, I think we had a couple of instances where their fans were plugged in, and then GB came back, and the problem is GB comes back with such a surge that your appliance will just blow out. And with a fan, what happened in the past is it caught fire. And I would really hate for persons to lose more of their assets because a fire raged in their house because they were out and GB went and came back, and it just, a surge happened that kind of, took them there. So manage those. Use, if you can, again, alternative energy solutions, a supply of flashlights and batteries, which you should have anyway because it is hurricane season. If you can afford, or if you can find affordable solar-powered lights for outdoor and indoor lighting, as well as solar-powered fans to remain cool, I do recommend that. Try to stay informed as well from reliable media outlets. GB themselves has started to communicate a bit better. I also want to touch a bit on the load shedding schedule. So what I can imagine is happening is that if they say they're going to cut Defiance, the Belvedere Dutch Quarter, and then suddenly Madame Estate starts to see a spike of power consumption, which is, again, entirely possible, then Madame Estate got to get shut down too, even though they were not on the list. So that's essentially what we're seeing happening, guys. Like, this is what the definition of an energy crisis is that the blackouts will roll and they will not be able to be done according to a strict schedule, because that's actually impossible. Because I can't guess that as I shut off Belvedere and Defiance, that all of a sudden Soccer Garden has 4 bars having a big party with extra speakers that pull extra power and extra lights and extra this and extra that. And then here we are. Or that they stack their fridge with extra ribs because we got a barbecue happening. When a big industrial freezer is full, she pulls more power to cool what's in the freezer more often. So to also prioritize your fridge, try to keep it with the essentials in it. Don't overload your freezer. Don't overload your fridge. If you have a big freezer, don't overload that either, because then you're contributing to the power spike, essentially, is what I'm trying to explain. And then, share resources with your folks in your neighborhood, information with your neighbors if they don't know, and, try to stay positive and adaptable. It's unfortunate to say, because there are people who have no idea about this time in our life when power outages were regular occurrence. Looking at you, 1994 to 1999. Like, especially because back then Sultry Ward was like the bastard child of St. Maarten. So Sultry Ward was just darkness everywhere you look. Just so I think I'm very accustomed to it. So it bothers me because I also don't like heat. But at the same time, I'm like, we've been here before, you know. And yeah, try to stay positive, you know, try as much to be flexible with your schedule and plan. Unfortunately, you know, plan those important activities while you do have power, recharge your stuff. Like my power bank is in my bag somewhere, but I travel with it. Whenever I get home, when I'm in St. Maarten, I put all three of my power banks to charge just in case. Um, you know, so just to have those ready. Candles, I've seen a lot of people say that they're getting candles, but if you can get small solar lights as much as possible, you know, you put them in the sun and they do create quite a bright light. So they're very helpful. And yeah, and try, you know, bond with family, friends, engage in non-digital activities. I know it's tough in this world that we're living in, but that also contributes to your mental health and your ability to, you know, stay positive and stay happy. There's stress relief techniques that you can use to manage frustration and anxiety. If the sun is out, go to the beach, take a walk, go play some basketball. If the sun is not out, you know, I think one of the more fascinating memories I have of the total blackouts that we would have in Sultry Ward when I was younger was, you know, fireflies, like seeing them around or just seeing, you know, them pop up. I heard somebody say that they saw them the other day. So, hey, maybe they're making a comeback. Nobody knows. And lastly, um, there is still hurricane season. So most of those GB tips are also hurricane season tips. You know, like I said in every live stream since we've entered hurricane season, you know, start collecting foodstuffs, little at a time if possible, with the aim to have bottled water for at least 2 weeks, canned food and other non-perishables and such, and at least 2 changes of clothes, underwear, shirt, pants, nothing too fancy. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the PFP channel to be notified of new videos, like, subscribe, follow, etc. We're also updating our Facebook and our Instagram. We always have been. And you can also join the WhatsApp community for direct PFP updates. You can find the QR code on the Facebook page and the Instagram page, I think, to get additional info. So I will be back on Tuesday. So the next live stream will be from St. Maarten. And yeah, definitely looking forward to tomorrow with how you call it, with IPCO wrapping up, and IPCO wrapping up tomorrow, seeing the students again, you know, and I really do hope that they do come out and yeah, coming back to then focus on fixing and finishing up what we discussed was going to be wrapped up here at IPCO. So thank you again for joining in. I know it's early for you all, so I wish everyone a good rest of the Sunday. My Sunday is going to be winding down just now, and yeah, the sun has been out until, I just want to say, the sun has been out because someone texted me and said, "You look tired." I'm like, yeah, because the sun is out till 11 p.m., guys. So for me, it's like, I got time to go to sleep. And then I look at the clock and it's 2 in the morning. So yeah, that's been my struggle being up here. But it has been great to see some Martin students and the Sabre students. I was really happy to see the Sabre students because, you know, they're always, we kind of forget them sometimes, but they're with us. So yeah, have a good one. Enjoy your Sunday and see you next week.